Hey everyone, I'm Tom June. Now, if you're not from Scotland, you might be forgiven for associating Scotland with this, or even this. But is it time that we started associating Scotland with spaceflight? And is Scotland a spacefaring nation? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think, so stick around and let's get going.
All right, lift off and the clock has started.
Now, as that old TV beer advert said, Scotland gave the world TV, penicillin and golf. You could also argue that some of its most important recent exports are whisky, Grand Theft Auto and Scott Manley. In fact, Scotland has a rich and varied history of innovation and industry, from biomedical sciences that gave the world its first working MRI machine, to shipbuilding, oil and gas, agriculture and alcohol production, as well as deep-fried Mars bars. As of 2023, Scotland has a booming spaceflight industry that's working in conjunction with the whole of the UK space sector. For me, a spaceflight fan growing up in the northeast of Scotland, I would have never dreamt that one day the UK would have had its own space agency, let alone there being a burgeoning space scene right in my own backyard. But this is now a reality. So let's break it down and see what's happening in this land of kilted madmen. Well, according to figures by the Scottish Government, the Scottish space sector talent pool accounts for around 18% of all UK space personnel roles. There are over 130 companies operating in Scotland right now that are involved in spaceflight operations, from R&D to service delivery, manufacturing and more. We have 2 companies solely dedicated to building rockets, 2 launch facilities in active development and 3 more launch facilities in the planning stages. So is there something in the water here, or what else is going on? Well, a large reason behind the boom is down to tax breaks offered by the Scottish Government. They estimate that operating costs in Scotland are up to 40% lower than elsewhere in the UK. Frankly, I think this is due to some bandwagoning by the Scottish Government, jumping on board what the UK Government started some years earlier, and no doubt helped by the creation of the UK Space Agency. But that's not a bad thing. You see, there is an economic benefit to spaceflight, and for those that might ask, well, what does spaceflight give us here on the ground? Well, aside from helping to advance technologies and providing us services to improve our lives, about £4 billion, because that's what the government estimates Scotland's space sector to be worth by 2030. But aside from all this financial stuff, there are some really exciting things happening in this country. In fact, pretty soon, Scottish companies will be able to provide full end-to-end services without having to go anywhere else. Universities across the country have active ongoing research and development projects. One of those projects is a part of a European-wide project called LISA, or the Laser Interferometer Space Antenna, which is a gravitational wave monitoring satellite being developed in conjunction with teams from the University of Glasgow's Institute for Gravitational Research and Edinburgh's UK Astronomy Technology Centre based at the Royal Observatory. Edinburgh itself is well known for being a centre of astronomy and space data thanks to the Royal Observatory, which helped to develop the mid-infrared instrument currently operating on board the James Webb Space Telescope, and other centres are engaged in Earth and space monitoring projects based in Edinburgh. Now, if Edinburgh is a data centre, then Glasgow is absolutely a manufacturing centre. Well known historically for shipbuilding, the banks of the River Clyde have been transformed into a spacecraft building arena. AAC Clydespace and Alba Orbital are both small sat manufacturers and have been rather successful, both based in Glasgow. In fact, AAC Clydespace are named as such because they occupied former premises of shipbuilders on the banks of the River Clyde in Glasgow. Founded in 2005, AAC Clydespace has supplied subsystems for missions across the world and launched Scotland's first ever satellite, the UCube-1, in 2014. Alba Orbital are a bit newer and they make Pico satellites. They've flown 4 successful missions with Rocket Lab and SpaceX in conjunction with companies from all across the world, including Israel, and they've launched their own version of CubeSats into orbit, and they currently hold a contract with the European Space Agency. Then we of course come to the heavy hitters. To have previously thought about Scotland having one company involved in rocket building would have seemed a pipe dream. Certainly as a kid watching NASA do their thing, I couldn't have dreamt that one day there would be people in my own backyard doing the same thing. Yet we have not one but two companies in Scotland building rockets, Skyrora and Orbex. Both are building rockets to launch small satellites into orbit, both are aiming to use in-house 3D printed engines, and both are aiming for low carbon launches using their own biofuels. At present, Skyrora has had some success with engine test firings and a launch attempt of their Skylark L earlier in 2022. They're also working on a 3-stage orbital class rocket called the Skyrora XL, and they're based in Edinburgh. Orbex have kept things a little bit closer to their chest, but they are still advancing on their semi-reusable 2-stage rocket called the Orbex Prime. And not only that, but both companies have stakes in launch facilities based in Scotland. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 launch facilities in active development. The furthest along is Saxavord Spaceport based on Unst in Shetland. They've recently completed the first of 3 launch pads and the start of the first launch tower. They've got a contract with German rocket manufacturer Rocket Factory Augsburg, and the first launch from that site is due later in 2023. Funding for the site comes from Lockheed Martin, as well as smaller investment by Skyrora, who are hoping to use that facility as their home base. Then we have the Sutherland Space Hub based up in Caithness. This site is being funded and developed by Orbex, who themselves are based just down the road in Forres in Moray. Both Saxavord and Sutherland will be capable of vertical rocket launches for payloads to be placed into sun-synchronous orbit of up to 550 kilometers in altitude. But we also have 3 more spaceports in the planning stages. Spaceport 1 is a proposal to build a commercial suborbital vertical launch spaceport at the site of Scolpig on North Uist in the Western Isles. Then we have a proposed launch site at Machrihanish Air Base in Campbelltown in Argyll and Bute, which will also be for suborbital vertical launches. And finally, Glasgow Prestwick Airport are aiming to enable horizontal launch capabilities similar to Spaceport Cornwall. So, when we look at all these various activities ongoing in Scotland at the moment, and these are just a fraction of some of the things happening, because every city across Scotland, from Aberdeen to Dundee and beyond, has some project involved with spaceflight. And we really can say that Scotland is a centre for spaceflight activities. Now, as a UK space news content provider, I am super excited by the prospect of seeing companies from all over the UK and the world coming to Scotland to launch rockets. But as someone born, bred, and still living in Scotland, I am more excited that very soon we're going to be able to see a full end-to-end scenario from initial R&D through manufacturing, production, and finally to watching Scottish payloads launching on Scottish rockets from Scottish spaceports to orbit. That would be a wild childhood dream come true, and that is why we now have to say that Scotland is a spacefaring nation. So, what do you think? Like I said, I only covered a small fraction of the activities that are ongoing in Scotland at the moment. If you do follow along with my main UK space news content, you will get updates from across the UK and from all of these companies in Scotland on their active missions and things that are ongoing at the moment. You can keep up to date with news from Saxavord, from Sutherland, Skyrora, Orbex, and all of these different companies. There are more and more things happening as we go along. So let me know your comments, let me know your thoughts, and if you liked the video as ever, don't forget to hit that like button if you did enjoy the video. Don't forget to subscribe and get notified for future UK space news content. I've been Tom June. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.